the next person to really make an impact on this field is Albert Ellis. And I'll tell you something, this guy's a character. He is really a character. Very courageous, very outspoken, and a very humorous personality, kind of in your face. I mean, he doesn't back down from his beliefs, even if they're not popular. And to the point of, he even is known for using some pretty strong language. So, you know, he's certainly kind of in your face. He has that style. He's very confident. But I'll tell you a really interesting story about this guy. Hey, you'd think, wow, this guy's really courageous. He was probably always this way with everything. No, that's not true. This was certainly in his personality right from the beginning, but there was one area of life that just tongue-tied Albert Ellis, and that was meeting women and asking them out. Hey, it would just tongue-tie him. And when he was in college, he realized that he was missing out on some great opportunities in life, and he really, really wanted to date. In fact, he ended up really loving women so much that he married 3 of them. All right. So this is something he really wanted, but when he was in college, you know, he realized he's missing all opportunity for this because of how very tongue-tied and shy he got around women. And he made a pact with himself that he was going to go to the city park, okay, and he was going to introduce himself and talk to 100 women in the next month, in the next 30 days, okay, and ask them out. Okay. And you know what happened? You know how many dates he scored from that? A big fat 0. But he was never afraid to approach women and ask them out again. And like I said, he ended up married to 3 women in the future, so women became a very important part of his life. And you're going to see how that affects his therapy as we move along here. So Albert Ellis, okay, has a very similar theory, but it's outlined differently, and it's based on the idea of irrational beliefs. So I told you I don't want you to get these mixed up with personal constructs. Okay, so personal constructs are broader. Irrational beliefs tend to be more focused. Irrational beliefs, so it's usually about the self, or the relationships that you're in, or certain kinds of people in your life. Okay, so more restricted here. Okay, let me give you an example, because he talked about the fact that people actually come into therapy. You see his ABC method here on the slide, right? They come into therapy complaining about C, the consequential emotion. Let's say that the consequential emotion is depression. And the reason for that, if you ask them, they don't give you the irrational belief because it largely lives in the unconscious. How else would something irrational, you know, keep living like this and persist? It largely lives in the unconscious. So what they give you is the activating experience. So this client might be coming in and complaining of depression. And when you ask them, why are you depressed? They'll say, I was divorced a few years ago. You find out, well, this was 5 years ago. And we talked to, you know, we might have talked about this before, but the idea here is that it's very normal for anyone to be depressed up to even a couple of years after a divorce. But if a severe depression is lasting beyond then, we know something else is going on, right? Okay, so they think it's the divorce, but really, Albert Ellis said, there is an irrational belief that is the direct cause of this depression, okay? And that is causing the psychological problems, the irrational belief. So what do you think the job of the therapist is? Well, that's easy. Replace the irrational belief with a rational one. And you might have guessed, too, that in order to do that, they first have to do what with that irrational belief? They have to bring it up into client's consciousness. So you know all about that from the psychodynamic approach. You know that someone can't refute the irrationality of a belief or emotion or such unless you first bring it into consciousness. Knowledge is power, right? All right. So therapists that use Ellis' technique in therapy, his kind of therapy, use confrontation. So you know his personality, very confrontational. Not surprising that they would use confrontation, but they often soften that with humor. Hey, and Albert Ellis was a humorous guy too. So he really had a way of being very confrontational with his clients, but not offending most of them because he would soften it with humor, and he really would like them and respect them. And certainly, you know, there's no one therapist is good for everybody. And if you ever need to see a therapist, you'll want to shop around because different people click, right? But he made this work with most of his clients by far, okay, using confrontation and humor. So confrontation, you know, like, is confronting the irrational belief. So first getting the client to admit to the irrational belief. And in our example of the divorce, he might find, for instance, that the client's irrational belief is, no one is ever going to love me again. And once they get that out of the client, right? Once they get it out of them, then they can start confronting the rationality of it, like, what kind of evidence do you have for this, that no one is ever going to love you again? What kind of evidence do you have for this? Or what kind of distortion in your thinking could, you know, cause you to have this belief? Quite confrontational, right? And you say, well, where does this humor come in? Albert Ellis sometimes sang to his clients, believe it or not. In fact, he would go around the country lecturing, hey, and wasn't unusual when he was talking to other professors, other scientists at a conference, and he burst into song. This guy really was his own man. And he loved to rewrite the lyrics of well-known songs and use them to describe his therapy and also to, you know, actually use within his therapy. And there's still a website up called Rational Humorous Songs by Albert Ellis, PhD. And you can buy a songbook and a cassette there, cassette, so you know that, you know, Albert Ellis was from a prior time, right? But I want to give you a couple of examples here of his rational humorous songs. And this is one of them. This is to the tune of the Yale Wittenproof song, and it's called Wine, Wine, Wine. Okay, remember, he's going to confront his clients. He's not going to let them whine, right? But he does so in a humorous way, and all of a sudden he's singing to them, I cannot have all of my wishes filled. Wine, wine, wine. I cannot have every frustration stilled. Wine, wine, wine. Life really owes me the things that I miss. Fate has to grant me eternal bliss. And since I must settle for less than this, wine, wine, wine. Right. And then my favorite of his, the second one I'm going to read to you, is called Beautiful Hang Up. And it's to the tune of a song from his time called Beautiful Dreamer. Beautiful hang up, why should we part when we have shared our whole lives from the start? We are so used to taking course. Oh, what a crime it would be to divorce. Beautiful hang up, don't go away. Who will befriend me if you do not stay? Though you still make me look like a jerk, living without you would take too much. Give it to me. Work, yeah. All right. Albert Ellis. Now, let me remind you of what Albert Ellis did when he wanted to get over his shyness in meeting women. Hey, some therapists took this a little far. Some therapists who really admired him ended up taking this a little too far with this therapy that they called fronting, using that confrontational style and flooding somebody, for instance, with their fear object. Okay, just like Albert Ellis did. So this would be kind of the idea of, if somebody is afraid of water, you throw them in the deep end of the pool, right? Or if somebody is afraid of spiders, as in this picture, you lock them in a room with spiders. Okay? And guess what? Big surprise, they were not very successful with their clients getting over their fears. Okay? And so, why do you think Albert Ellis was successful, but these clients tended not to be? I want you to pause the video for a minute, think about that, and then come back and compare your answer. The reason for this, the reason why these therapists, tended not to have much success with their clients, in fact, usually quite the opposite, is that in order for the technique of flooding to be successful, it has to be self-imposed. It must be self-imposed. Albert Ellis imposed that on himself. So flooding can be used in therapy as a suggestion if the client happens to have as strong of a personality as Albert Ellis and as strong of a motivation as Albert Ellis. Then they might go for it, and they might do it to themselves, right?